Welcome to the Kimberlite webinar to take a comprehensive look at the big three oilfield service company suppliers, Schlumberger, Baker Hughes, and Halliburton, and to take a deep dive into the Permian Basin. My name is David Batt, President of Kimberlite Research, and I'm glad you're able to join us here today. This is the 15th in the Kimberlite webinar series that we conduct for the oil and gas operators globally. Our past webinars have included reviews of many other oilfield services that you, as oil and gas operators, use in your day-to-day work, from drilling services, artificial lift, hydraulic fracturing, surface wellheads, drill bits, subsea, pipeline integrity, and others. Let us know if you or your colleagues need access to any of these prior webinars, and we'll be glad to connect you with them. Today, we'll be looking at the big three oilfield service companies, Schlumberger, Halliburton, Baker Hughes globally, and we'll be taking a deep dive into the Permian Basin. Today's assessment is going to be looking not just at the big three, but we'll look at several of the other smaller suppliers of how the various suppliers stack up in terms of technology and performance. Feel free to submit questions in the chat box as we go along, and we'll monitor that as best we can and help to address them. Each year, Kimberlite Research, just a little bit of background, will conduct about 3,000 one-on-one personal interviews with oil and gas operators globally. You, the users of these oilfield services, provide great feedback about what technologies you're using that are working and not working, what suppliers you're using for various oilfield services, and how the suppliers are performing. With that information and your gift of feedback, we're able to objectively benchmark supplier performance and competitive position, technology adoption. We prepare a series of reports across information evaluation, drilling, completion, production, and subsea and pipeline. For those of you that have participated in our past industry surveys and studies, I thank you for that. We collaborate with many oil companies of all sizes. And so we're glad to collaborate with you privately and as well if you'd like to contact us. We conduct these webinars for the oil and gas operators as a courtesy and to help provide 360-degree feedback to what the market and what we're learning. This exhibit is an exhibit we'll be using quite a bit of today, so I just want to make sure everyone's familiar with this exhibit before we get started. This is the value map or quadrant map, as we describe it at Kimberlite. We cross-plot supplier performance on the x-axis versus pricing competitiveness on the y-axis. Suppliers in the top right are viewed as performing better than industry average. They do cost more than industry norm, but they cost more, but they're worth it. These are usually the premium suppliers in the marketplace. The bottom right quadrant is for value advantage suppliers. Commonly, you see a lot of the small to mid-tier suppliers down here that are trying to gain market share and position themselves in a very favorable position to do that. You have discount providers, bottom left, and you have those oilfield service company providers that are competitively challenged in this top left-hand quadrant. Either they need to put together a performance improvement plan. So with that, we'll dive in. Many of the things that we capture at Kimberlite include future activity and trends, including for 2022. You see in U.S. land, we plan to drill, based on your feedback from the oil and gas operators, about 21.6% more wells. And so we have a coordinated uplift of activity, both internationally and offshore and North America. From an oil and gas operator perspective, you can only imagine what impact this will have with the constrained supply chain. Labor, access to equipment, everything, as you know, is going to tighten up. COVID certainly played a role, but obviously the downturn of 2020 caused many oilfield service companies to really prune their portfolios and cut back on the product lines they serve, the geographic locations in which they serve, and their capacity. As we start to ramp back up universally across the globe, this is going to place a lot of strain. So from an oil company, oil and gas operator's perspective, you have to think about your sourcing of equipment and services, going into 22 and probably into 23 and 24, and try to be very proactive in your thoughts about that. As we interview and prepare these various reports, we do capture some information about ESG. What we do find is that in North America, about half of the North America operators are investing, increasing spending in ESG. The other half are remaining about flat. It does vary across the globe. Generally speaking, in North America, for ESG-related items, it's largely focused with reduction of emissions and monitoring of emissions, whereas internationally, it's a little bit more broader-based. So with that, I think we're going to dive in. If we start out and look at North America land, with all the combined product lines together, drilling, completion, production, formation evaluation, what you see in this competitive landscape is that the small to mid-tier oilfield service companies combined, that we call together and put them together as all others, and we're glad to dive into any particular product lines and such later if there's particular areas of interest. But in aggregate, these small to mid-tier suppliers are viewed as delivering the best overall value in the North America market, creating some competitive headwinds for the Schlumbergers, Halliburtons, and Baker Hughes. These small to mid-tiers comprise about 65% of the North America market, and if you turn this to the Permian Basin for a moment, they comprise 68% market share. What you find is when you track the Net Promoter Score of these small to mid-tiers, in gray here, all others, they're consistently getting customer reviews higher than industry average for customer loyalty and for performance, while offering competitive pricing. But keep in mind, as we go into each particular report that we prepare, be it for drill bits or for packers or for hydraulic fracturing or for wireline logging, in this case we have downhole mud motors. What we find is there's a huge range and variance of performance of all these downhole mud motor suppliers. Some get higher ratings, closer to 8 or 9 on a scale of 1 to 10 on these performance factors. Others get very low ratings, down around 6 on average, right? And so when we track the performance of each of these oilfield service company suppliers by product line, by region, this happens to be North America land for downhole mud motors, and we track this on an annual basis with thousands and thousands of supplier performance reviews, what you clearly see is not all oilfield service company suppliers are performing consistently from year to year. Some are, some aren't, and they're not all performing at the same level. Some suppliers are performing better than other suppliers, and this creates quite a bit of challenge for you as an oil and gas operating company. You may use 1 or 2 or 3 suppliers, but you may not know how some of the other suppliers perform. When we assess objectively through the voice of the operators who use these services, the performance of the various suppliers, what we find is if you look at the North American landscape, say for mud motors, for example, oftentimes you'll find some small to mid-tiers like MS Directional, Phoenix, and Pro Directional, but here's a big 3. Here's Baker Hughes, one of the big 3, viewed as delivering really good value, very good performance. Sometimes you find some small to mid-tiers like Lean and KLX underperforming, but offering low pricing to be more of a discount offering. And sometimes you'll find some suppliers kind of more in a competitive, disadvantaged position where their pricing that they're charging in the market versus their performance from the operator's perspective, not viewed as delivering the best overall value. So keep that in mind as we go through product line by product line when we conduct our research. If you take a look at mud motors and you break it into basins like the Permian Basin, the Eagle Ford, the Haynesville, or even in Canada, again, you'll find that not all oilfield service company suppliers are performing equally in all the geographic regions. So I know many of you here today on this call may be located in the Permian Basin or the Marcellus. We may have some international operators on the call today. So feel free to reach out to us as needed if we need to take a deep dive, say, into West Africa or Asia Pacific region or North Sea for you, and again for the U.S. operators. Here in the Permian Basin, you see MS Directional, Phoenix, and NOV viewed as delivering really strong value. And you've got some of the small to mid-tiers as a group positioned over here as a discount provider. Whereas in the Haynesville, you see Vico, Halliburton, Baker Hughes, and some of the big 3 showing up as delivering really good value. So being able to do your due diligence by basin and operational area is very critical to, as an oil and gas operator, to identify best value in a world in which in some cases you have many choices to choose from, but you don't know how some of these suppliers perform because you've never used them. When you take a look at the key drivers in the selection of oil field services in North America land, and this is combined all product lines, drilling, completion, production, formation, evaluation, what we find is in the Permian Basin, service levels is a really key driver for oil companies in their recommendation for use of an oil field service company. You can see that Weatherford is viewed very favorably by the price buyers, but when you get to the service buyers, you see that a lot of these small to mid-tiers begin to stand out from the rest of the pack. When you move to the international land market overall, you do see a differentiated market here where Schlumberger is clearly in the premium quadrant, cost more but worth it. Their performance profile is slightly out of alignment with pricing, but by and large, you're going to see some more about Schlumberger, about internationally and offshore. They're a pretty strong performer consistently across various product lines. Baker Hughes and Halliburton internationally are viewed as delivering an acceptable level of value, well within the fair value fairway that you see running diagonally from the northeast quadrant down to the southwest quadrant. But you also see they're also not viewed as the leader in performance either. And when you move internationally, you find that these small to mid-tier suppliers that were performing better than industry average in North America are now performing below industry average internationally. When you move offshore, you see again Schlumberger is that premium cost more but worth it supplier, Baker Hughes and Halliburton more as a value alternative provider. When we go ahead and we start to take a look, say, at Baker Hughes, let's take a closer look at Baker Hughes. If you look at Baker Hughes by geographic region, what you find is geographically, in the international segments, they tend to be viewed as delivering really strong value, oftentimes performing better than industry average. But in North America land, you begin to see how they're becoming a little bit more competitively challenged, like we were sharing earlier. Just as a point of comparison, if you were to compare Baker Hughes' performance by geographic region across all product lines versus Schlumberger, you see how Schlumberger by region, West Africa, Middle East, North Sea, Asia Pac, Latin America, clearly positioned in this top right-hand premium quadrant, performing better than industry average, but they cost more, but they're worth it. But they too are competitively challenged in North America. Baker Hughes is viewed as performing better than industry average in many of the international markets and viewed as a really strong value. By product line for Baker Hughes, however, you see that not all their product lines are performing at the exact same consistent level. You've got certain product lines like subsea and surface wellheads and wireline and cementing and intervention services and mud logging that are viewed as underperforming, and you see they bring strong value with some other product lines. If you start to take a look at Baker Hughes by North America land on the left, international land in the middle, and offshore on the right side of your graph, and each one of these dots is a different product line, you begin to see how consistent, or in some cases not consistent, they are by product line. But generally speaking, Baker Hughes is viewed as delivering very strong value. If you take a look at what Baker Hughes looked like in 2020, you can see that their consistency of performance was not as strong. In the downturn of 2020, Baker Hughes, along with Halliburton and Schlumberger, each took that as an opportunity to critically review their portfolio and try to prune or sell or get rid of or close down unprofitable product lines in geographic regions. And as a result, you can see that Baker Hughes' profile and performance profile in 2020 changed dramatically for the better in 2021. When you go into the Permian Basin for Baker Hughes, you see Baker Hughes has some really strong competitive strengths. So even though up to this point I keep talking about how the big three are challenged in the North American land market to the small and mid-tiers, there are several product lines in which the big three excel in the Permian Basin. And when you look at it very carefully, you'll see that drilling services, completion services, and liner hangers happen to be good performance competitive strengths for Baker Hughes. And it's really with production chemicals, LWD. ESPs are viewed as underperforming, but they're fairly valued and delivering acceptable value. You start to look at it a little bit more by product line. You can start to see drilling services globally or worldwide versus completion services for Baker Hughes, production, and then formation evaluation. Turning to Halliburton really quick, what we find is that Halliburton looks very similar to Baker Hughes with a slight change. Internationally, they tend to perform on par with industry average or slightly below, whereas Baker Hughes was either on par with industry average or slightly better. But the part they have both in common is they're both viewed as delivering an acceptable value for the dollar. Gulf of Mexico, strong value for Halliburton. They do show some competitive challenges in the North America land market that we've talked about previously. You can see that comparison Halliburton to the left, Schlumberger to the right. If you go into the Permian Basin for Halliburton, what you'll find is that Halliburton too, although they're challenged in North America land, that you can see that these product lines are not performing at consistent levels based on the reviews of the Permian Basin operators. And our Permian Basin research is based on interviews with about 2,100 customers, over 200 E&P operators in the Permian Basin over the years, and we've been conducting our research. And you see that Halliburton has really strong strengths with pumping services and ESPs. Hydraulic fracturing is usually exceptionally strong and kind of migrated over here to the left for the first time in 6 years. You see strong value in many other product lines down here with chemicals and mud motors and such. Halliburton seems to be challenged mostly with cementing tools, wireline perforating, MWD, a lot of Sperry product lines, drill bits, intervention services. That's where they're having the most difficulty in being competitive. But just like we talked about with Baker Hughes, back in 2020, again, this is 2020, if you take a look at Halliburton's overall performance by North America land, international land, and offshore by product line, you saw a lot of inconsistency of performance. They too took the downturn of 2020 as an opportunity to shut down rooftops, close out product lines in geographic markets and regions and basins and districts. And you can see how their performance profile has tightened up considerably as well. And so you continue to see a trend where the downturn was used by the big three oilfield service companies to become a little bit more efficient and to recognize where they had strengths and performed well and where they had some weaknesses and were not performing so well. And overall, their performance levels are improving. So that's a very positive sign for the industry and for the oil and gas operators. If you take a look at Schlumberger, you find that they have a very distinctive different view than Halliburton and Baker Hughes. You can see just exactly how strong they are internationally. They too struggle a little bit in North America, just like we talked about previously. You can see how consistent they are from product line to product line. And so when you start to take a look at Schlumberger in offshore to the right, international land in the middle, and North America land on the left-hand side of your screen, when you look at Schlumberger in the offshore market, there's really no other oilfield service company supplier of a significant size, particularly the big three, that exhibit this really consistent level of performance. So regardless if you like or dislike Schlumberger, the data reveals, based on voice of the operators and your peers in the industry, that on a statistic probabilistic basis, Schlumberger is going to consistently deliver the highest level of consistent performance offshore and internationally. When you get to North America land, they're not nearly as consistent. But again, if you compare this to just 2020 and the downturn, you can see how Schlumberger has done a really good job of cleaning up their portfolios. As you know, hydraulic fracturing and wireline perforating in U.S. land went to Liberty Oilfield Services. Their rod lift pumping business went to Lufkin. They align with Edge mud logging for surface logging, so all the Schlumberger gas detection technologies can be used for mud logging and surface logging in U.S. land, but they're delivered to partner Edge mud logging company. So they've become very smart about how to leverage their technology prowess to make these technologies available to you, but maybe do it in a way that's a little bit more efficient and lends itself to better outcomes for Schlumberger as well as for the operator. You can see in the Permian Basin that even Schlumberger has strengths, even though we keep talking about how the big three are competitively challenged versus the small to mid-tier suppliers. Again, you see strengths for Schlumberger. Schlumberger exhibits strengths. Their cementing services improved in the Permian Basin in 2021. sod wall coring. Their surface wellheads improved in 2021, wireline logging and such. And so you do see some areas, ESPs and rotary steerables seem to be lagging in the Permian Basin for 2021 based on performance reviews that we've received. And so when you kind of look at things on a global basis, you clearly see some differences. If we take just a little bit of a deeper dive, if we could, right into the Permian Basin here. So we're going to take a little bit deeper dive into the Permian Basin. And we'll come in here and take a look at Baker Hughes first. And what we find is in the Permian Basin, Baker Hughes categorically seems to be viewed most favorably by the large independents and their drilling services, like we talked about. We talked about how they have strengths in many of these areas in the Permian Basin. When you take a look at Halliburton, you'll find that Halliburton's profile is a little bit different. The major oil companies tend to see some of the better value in the Permian Basin with Halliburton. And they have a bunch of different drilling services. And in the drilling category, keep in mind, that includes cementing services and liner hangers, which is helping that out. Sperry tries to pull it this way, but they tend to struggle a little bit more in the production space, with the exception of ESPs, because when you look at Halliburton's ESPs, you can see they're exceptionally strong. Cementing is part of the drilling category along with liner hangers. Take a look at Schlumberger in the Permian Basin. What you find is, oddly enough, you've got the large independents that are seeing strong value in Schlumberger. Formation evaluation is a particular strength for Schlumberger, but they also have other areas outside of formation evaluation that fall in the drilling category, like pressure control for surface wellheads and cementing, and obviously sod wall coring is part of the formation evaluation offerings. When you look at Weatherford, what you find with Weatherford is Weatherford shows very strong strengths with cementing tools. While they're commonly positioned as a discount provider down here in the bottom left, they have made some changes in their pricing strategies and the performance profiles as Weatherford too has exited many of the product lines in U.S. land and in the Permian Basin and opted to bring several of those services over into the international land market. So those are kind of quick overviews, if you will, of the big three on a global basis, and a little bit deeper dive into the Permian Basin. Keep in mind that for any of the product line reports that we do publish, say we look at hydraulic fracturing, since that tends to be one that seems to be of importance to so many. If you go and you take a look at the hydraulic fracturing market really quick from the hydraulic fracturing report, what you find is, you've got Halliburton and Liberty, the market share leaders. You've got NexTier and Alamo that have recently merged together. And you can see that the level of value that's being delivered by the various hydraulic fracturing suppliers can vary quite significantly. And so, again, we track how each of these suppliers are viewed in terms of overall performance and pricing competitiveness to help identify best value. If you take a look at Halliburton year to year in the United States land market, you can see that they've consistently been viewed as that premium-based supplier, cost more, get worth it. It's only in 2021 then they slide over here to the left. And it's not so much that Halliburton's performance has declined so much. It's really a function that a lot of these small to mid-tier suppliers' performance review ratings have improved. And as they improve, they're kind of closing the gap of that superior leadership that Halliburton has historically held. When you take a look at Liberty Oilfield Services, you can see how they're pretty consistently viewed as performing better than industry average and viewed as a solid value and tend to provide good, consistent performance. You can see NexTier positioned as a good value. You can also see where Universal is viewed as a value advantage supplier. FTS is becoming part of ProFrac, and then CalFrac is also viewed as a discount provider. And so I'll stop here and just check a look and see if we have any quick questions, if there's any product lines of interest that folks would like to delve into. looks like we have something that's come up on electric submersible pumps. So I'll give you a quick overview of electric submersible pumps for the artificial lift market, and this will serve as another good example of how you sometimes will see variability as you move around from basin to basin. If you move into the North America land market for electric submersible pumps, you'll see that there's a lot of value. Pay more, get more; pay less, get less. You see differentiated value in the electric submersible pump market. You see a lot of the small to mid-tier players that are trying to enter the market, like Valiant, Extract, and Endurance, while their customer bases are not as large as some of the other electric submersible pump providers. You can see that the customers with whom they're having their engagements with are very pleased with the overall performance and value that they're receiving. Of course, when you deal with a small to mid-tier company like this, as an oil company, you want to be careful to make sure that you feel like they're able to scale up to handle your business. Certainly, we all realize that with the tightening of trucking and transportation and supply chain constraints, it's a really big challenge today, particularly when we start to continue to add rigs and drill. Gas lift. Sure, we can pull up some gas lift. Let me see here. I need to go in there and pull up there's an interesting gas lift. Let me see if I can go find some gas lift slides. One second. Nope. I pulled the wrong year. This is 2020, not 21, but I'll go ahead and show you the 2021 gas lift here. I'll just start with 2020. And I'll try and go back and try to find the big change from 20 to 21, and this slide doesn't show it, was Flowco was historically the leader in gas lift. In 21, their performance declined here to the left, and Priority Energy moved over here to the right. So we commonly see some movement from year to year in some of these suppliers. Any sense for how Halliburton's done with its artificial lift business over the last few years as Weatherford's bankruptcy hurt them? Halliburton is in the electric submersible pump market, and they historically were the leaders in electric submersible pump. And if you take a look at Halliburton's profile for electric submersible pumps, they've done a really good job over the years. So if you take a look, they were always the performance leader, and they became the market share leader. And then, when they were acquired by Halliburton, they started to trend in a negative fashion to the point in 2020 they were experiencing some performance and competitive headwinds, and they improved their performance from 20 to 2021. Weatherford's bankruptcy, what hurt Weatherford was they came out of bankruptcy and they thought they had everything balanced out, and then COVID hit, and they again ended up a little bit upside down. So they had to make some additional retrenchments of where they want to prioritize and focus their businesses. So they pulled out the U.S. land market for many services like drilling services. But when it comes to artificial lift for Weatherford, their gas lift business did improve a little bit. Rod lift remains relatively stable. So if we take a look at, say, rod lift for Weatherford really quick, and we see it's Endurance, TRC, Liberty. Here's Weatherford on a worldwide basis. What we find for Weatherford is they got their rods business in North America land over here, and their pumps business here. When it comes to for Weatherford for rods, they've been consistently positioned over here as an underperformer. And so from 20 to 21, you can see that Weatherford's performance profile is improving for surface units. So that's a good thing. When you move to sucker rods for Weatherford, But you find Weatherford's 20 to 21, the performance profile really didn't improve, but their pricing profile improved. And when you get to downhole pumps for Weatherford in the North American land market, what you find is that Weatherford's performance declined. So that they tend to be struggling a little bit more with rod lift, trying to get onto the right-hand side of the performance profile in the U.S. land market. And so, they've declined on that. But if I can't grab the 2021 gas lift slides very quickly here, but they've certainly, for gas lift, their performance did improve. Let me see, any other quick questions? Well, with that, I'm going to just provide a quick summary then. It's very clear that when we look based on over 550,000 supplier performance ratings across interviews with about 15,000 users of oilfield services globally, see clear differences in performance from region to region with the various oilfield service company suppliers. Just about so many of these oilfield service company suppliers have some really strong competitive strengths. They have some areas that they struggle in a little bit. When you look at the overall trends, however, in North America land, it's very clear in North America land that the small to mid-tier suppliers in aggregate, for which there are hundreds of them, in North America land, they do quite a good job of being responsive to the oil and gas operators. The challenge back to you, the oil and gas operators, is if you've only used 2 or 3 of the downhole mud motor suppliers, how do the other 10 or 20 perform? And there's a risk in making a change like that. But with the markets tightening in the 22 and 23, I think, there's going to be a time for you to maybe expand your due diligence, to look for improved value and improved sourcing opportunities out there, recognizing that, you're fortunate in North America land to have lots of choices to choose from. So that's a good thing. When you move internationally and offshore, oftentimes you begin to realize that you have fewer choices to choose from as an oil and gas operator. But when you look at the international and offshore markets, when you look at the big three, all 3 of the big 3 are generally viewed as delivering pretty strong value. They do vary by geographic region, like maybe Asia-Pac, Middle East, North Sea, Latin America a little bit. But by and large, Schlumberger is probably the most consistent performer in the offshore and international markets from product line to product line. They're certainly not perfect, but those are certainly key areas of strengths for Schlumberger. If any of you have any questions about a particular service within the oilfield services, including pipeline inspection and integrity management, or a particular region around the world, please feel free to reach out. For those of you that have participated in our industry research, we thank you. I hope this gives you an idea of what we're able to do with your feedback on technology adoptions, suppliers and how they perform, about how we can benchmark and objectively demonstrate back to you about how consistent or inconsistent the suppliers are performing. Are the categories improving in performance levels or staying flat or declining? So thank you again for joining, and feel free to reach out if you care to discuss anything in further detail. Thank you very much.